Right, well, thank you very much, everyone, for coming along today. We're delighted to be sharing the new report that's just out today. And we were putting the finishing touches on it this morning, in fact. So it's called Journey Into Fatherhood. And it's all about dad's experience of, or men's experience becoming a dad. Um, so it's a pretty big report. I think it's about 40 pages, Connor, or something like that.
Yeah.
45. It's a
Yeah.
pretty big report. So we can't get through all of it, unfortunately, today. Um, it's split up into these sections. So time with dad, which is all about a little bit about the biology of fathers and why time spent together matters. How dads are spending time with their babies particularly, and dads and play specifically. We're going to talk about barriers to bonding. I'll talk a little bit about paternity leave and digital distraction. Sadly, there's quite a lot in the report about workplaces and barriers to engagement because of employment and workplace. We also have another section about practical barriers, which we won't go into today. Um, Finally, we'll have a section looking at supporting new dads. We won't have time to go into new dads' mental health or their activities within community settings, but we will look at where dads turn to for advice and what's missing for them. So, in terms of support, where are we falling short? What support aren't dads getting? And lastly, but not by no means leastly, by no means least, we'll end with the advice that one dad or dads would give to each other. So, if they could provide information to another dad, what would it be? Um, I'm so pleased that we're joined today by our expert panel. So Lisa Golds from University of Edinburgh, who's doing some amazing work on parents' interaction with digital media during the perinatal period. Aimee Hunt, who we work very closely with at Smart Play Network, who was involved in the development of the DAD survey and has been working with us for years and years, actually. And also Greg Borthwick from Dad's Rock, who, again, I don't know when you started at Dad's Rock, but we've known each other and we've been reliant on you, Greg, and Dad's Rock for a number of years. So we're absolutely delighted to have these experts really in their field along today to reflect on the findings and to give their perspective, I suppose, on what we found. So before I get going in earnest, I thought it would be useful just to just recap on some of the key findings from the report. So our last report from our DAD survey, our 2025 DAD survey, that was released in November. So I just thought I'd touch on some of the key findings from that, just to give you a bit of context on dads in Scotland right at the moment. So if you're not aware of our dad survey, we have been putting out dad surveys for a number of years actually, but this series really started at the beginning of the pandemic, back in 2020. Our first survey within this series was in June 2020, and this is the seventh in that series. And since we started, we've been asking a series of questions which have remained largely unaltered during that time. So we can kind of get a sense of trends over time, how dads are coping at home and at work, how's their mental health, that sort of thing. So we can kind of get a sense of what life's like for them over a number of years. So going from 24 into 25, it's probably useful to just understand a little bit of the context. So dads this year were really struggling with expenses in the household. So this is a quote from the Understanding Scotland report back in May 2025. And that's a kind of a generic report that goes out to adults across Scotland. So I think 2,000 adults across Scotland, and one of their findings was stated as crucially that the economic pressures were not borne equally across society. Households with children are consistently and more likely to report serious impacts from deteriorating mental health, physical health, food insecurity, and strained relationships as a result of our current economic position. So probably the most important finding from our, and perhaps the most shocking finding in a way, from our DAD's report back in November, was that we were finding dads spending less time engaged in childhood care and household chores. And that suggests a sort of slide back towards gender stereotypes. So you can see the the image on the left-hand side, the graph on the left-hand side, shows from about 2022 to 2024, the shape of the graph remains largely unchanged, with the number of dads spending more than 25 hours reaching 40% actually in 2024. So there is consistently just a slight uptick pretty much every year of the number of dads spending more and more time with their children, playing with them and supporting their learning. This year, that figure seemed to have dropped quite considerably, down from 40% down to 17%. And although we don't know for sure what's causing that drop, we suspect it might be the financial pressure that families are finding themselves under. And it's a bit of a concerning slide backwards. And we can see actually in the graph on the right-hand side that this change in the amount of time that dads are spending with their children is mirrored in the amount of time that they're spending on household chores. So dads, unfortunately, are spending less time on chores and less time on childcare. The other thing that we found is that dads are continuing to find balancing work and family life very difficult. So just under half of dads told us that, and this is across the board, so this is dads of all ages or dads with children of all ages, were finding balancing work and family life is either very difficult or difficult. So these are the blue colors on that pie chart that you can see on the left-hand side. And again, you can see compared to previous years, it's a slight improvement from 2024, which seemed to be a particularly bad year. But actually, the numbers are comparable to 2023 and certainly worse in 2022. One of the reasons, as I said, is I think the financial situation that many families are finding themselves in, that it's hard to make ends meet. I think one of the other issues is potentially about dad's access to flexible working. So you can see at the bottom, there's a comparison between 2022 and 2023, 2024 and 2025 on the number of dads who said that they had flexibility on where they worked. So that was fairly consistent between 2022 and 2024, hovering around 70%. That's dropped down to 61% this year. So that might be one of the reasons that we're seeing less dads involved in childcare and at home. And finally, just having a look at dad's mental health. So poor mental health continues to affect dads, particularly those living in deprived areas or separated from their children all or some of the time. So once again, if you look at the chart on the left-hand side, this is the number of dads who are rating their mental health right now. So you can see that 5% of dads told us that their mental health was very poor, and a further 27% said that it wasn't great. So around a third of dads are really struggling with their mental health. This is a slight improvement again from 2024, where 10% of dads were telling us that their mental health was very poor. So on the face of it, that looks like an improving situation. But once again, if we look back to 2022 and 2023, that is still fairly comparable, actually. So it's a kind of return to levels before 2024. And once again, if you have a look at the right-hand side, what's causing deterioration in mental health? Primarily, it's work pressures, and then the second reason that fathers gave, or men who were struggling with their mental health gave, was physical and mental health issues, and third was relationship difficulties, and so on and so forth. So that gives you a kind of overview, I hope, of dads right now, and we can send out a link to the full report from November last year later on, but that's just to give you a flavour. Um, so as I said, the Journey from Fatherhood is quite a big report, and I have to say an absolutely enormous thank you to Connor McKinley, who has tirelessly been spending time putting this report together, and it's absolutely largely down to him that we've got that today. So a huge thanks to him. And if I get stuck, I'll have to ask Connor for a bit more information. But we're going to start off before I get into the meat of what we found, or the data that we've drawn together. I'm going to start off by talking a little bit about why time matters with dads, and a little bit about the biology of fathers, to give you a little bit of context why it matters. So, and apologies if you've heard me talking about this, but I think it's important just to provide some context before launching into the findings. So until reasonably recently, probably the last 25 years or so, it was just largely assumed that mums were instinctive caregivers, and dads just had to learn. So baby came along and they just had to learn how to provide care. So mums went through the pregnancy, her body changed, her brain changed, and she was instinctively able to care for her child. And dads were this kind of bolt on that just had to learn everything. So the last 25 years, really, we've begun to understand that dads' bodies and brains actually change in order that they can be great caregivers too. They're primed biologically to be caregivers also. So how do we know this? Well, we can look at the hormones, and I'm just looking at two in this instance, but dad's hormones change even during pregnancy, actually. So if dad is well bonded to mum during pregnancy, oxytocin levels between both partners, so both mum and dad, tend to sync up together, so they become more similar. And incredible, I find this incredible actually. But it actually makes mums and dads' personalities more similar, so they become this kind of more instinctive parenting team. It means that they're less likely to argue, less likely to have confrontations, that sort of thing, under the kind of stresses and strains that newborns put on parents. So even before pregnancy, dads' bodies are already starting to change, and their hormone levels are starting to change. Around the time of the birth, dad's testosterone levels also drop. It can be up to a third. It's can be quite a significant drop in testosterone levels for dads. And if they stay well bonded with their child, those testosterone levels never return to that base level. And that's really to help dads focus on their families, and to make sure that they are able to provide greater empathy towards their partner and their children. So again, it's kind of all part of that package of dads becoming more able to give care and to support baby and the whole family. During this period of transition as well, there's a period of neuroplasticity, which has been well known in mums. So mums get this kind of baby brain, that brain fog. And it's actually a period of time in adulthood where mums' brains can literally rewire. So it's that neuroplasticity. It's a period of where the brain can more easily rewire than in other times during parenthood. Now, again, we thought that this was just something that happened to mums, but actually new imaging techniques have shown that dads also, their brains change during that kind of period of transition into fatherhood. So new dads' brains uh, often increase in size in areas associated with affectionate care, threat detection, and problem solving. Now, the key actually, both for mums and dads with this neuroplasticity, so the brain is kind of ready to accept these new neural pathways. They're being primed to change during this period. But what actually cements the change and makes these changes happen is the number of hours spent alone with the infant. So the more hours that dads and mums are spending alone with their child, the greater the neural changes. It's also worth noting, and I won't go into too much detail about this, but mums and dads uh, brains respond differently when they are looking at a picture of their or a video of their newborn or their child. So mums and dads brains, so if they're shown a video of their child, mums and dads brains show similar activity in areas relating to empathy. So mums and dads are both equally as good at empathizing with their child, but mums brains tend to light up in a very ancient part of the brain, the amygdala, which is very, very old part of the brain, which is associated with nurture, kind of very I don't want to say primeval, but a very ancient kind of impulse to nurture and to be affectionate to their child, and importantly, to detect any threats around that child. Dads, on the other hand, the area of of greatest activity is in the neocortex. It's a new part of the brain, and it's far more related to reasoning, and it's more linked to um, being able to think about what a child will need to survive and thrive in our world and be able to respond to that. So things like social interactions and pushing boundaries. Now, that's not to say that dads don't have the amygdala light up or this area is completely inactive. It's just where you see these peak responses. But there's certainly a difference between mums and dads in that area. So Anna Macken, who's written extensively on this, she says that importantly, and I suppose it's another distinct issue, that dads get this get peaks in neurobiological reward from playing, which is associated with that kind of neocortex activity, while mums get their hit from nurturing. So that's kind of that area in the amygdala that's lighting up. And that's hence why kids have a tendency to seek dad out for play and run to mum for that reassuring hug. And these are some findings from our survey from 2024, where we asked dads what their favorite way of spending time with their children was. So they were open to write whatever they liked. And 44% of all the dads, these 336 dads who participated or told us something, mentioned play or playing. And you can see actually we plotted this information against the age of their youngest child. And you can see there's a really high level of playfulness, even in children under one. So 43% of dads with a child under one mentioned play or playing. That rose to 43% for dads with a child between 1 and 5 years. There's a slight tail off with dads with a child 6 to 8, and then quite a sharp drop with children 9 to 12 and 13 to 17. I guess that's as children become more interested in playing with their peers and less interested in playing with adults. So very interesting that what Anna Macken was saying, we were certainly seeing within our survey data. If we look in a little bit more detail at the way dads like to spend time together, again, we looked in more depth at the types of activity that they liked. And we found certainly with children, with dads who had just one child under one, we could see to begin with, certainly at that age, that dads just enjoyed hanging out with their kids. And that's probably, as you'd expect, certainly with a newborn, it's just kind of getting to know your child. It's unstructured time, whether that's feeding or, just hanging out together, just playing and getting to know each other. So most of the dads talked about that experience of hanging out together. But perhaps surprisingly, actually, the second most um, prevalent answer was around playing with their children. So even at that really young age, under one, dads were still really keen to play with their children. And what was even more surprising to me, actually, for this age group, is that dads wanted to play with their children and wanted to go outside with their children, wanted them to experience the outside world with their kids. And you can see actually that these these tendency these tendencies, certainly around play and around being outdoors with kids, they sort of grew in intensity over the years. So when the child gets to one, outdoor activities go from 29 dads, or 29% of dads um, providing that answer to 62% of dads saying that they like going out and doing things outside. And then again, another step up to 79% during the slightly later early years. And this kind of the idea of hanging out together reduces slightly over time. And the other thing that's probably worth looking at and remarking on is dads, it's not just about playing and just about hanging out. Also, dads really like to help their children learn and tell stories and read to them. So you can see even under one, so this is dads under ones, 21% of them like to help their children learn, and 21% of them like reading to their children or telling them stories. So there's a really good baseline to build on there. Dads want to be engaged in that kind of more formal activity of learning. So I'm going to come to our expert panel. So obviously we're seeing this decrease in the number of dads, certainly spending lots and lots of time playing with their children, which is a bit concerning. I think it's probably also fair to say that playfulness is really undervalued by society generally, and yet we know it's crucial for child development. So I'm going to come to you first, Aimee, and just ask, how do you think we best get the message out to dads about play, and how do we support dads to engage with play?
Hi, Kathy. So I'm going to take this from two angles. I think you've got the message side and the support side. So I think from a messaging side, there's lots of different ways we can do this, but one of the key things is about language. And I think it's about changing the way we use language to attract more dads into understanding the importance of play and understanding the facts behind why do they do what they do, why should they engage, how they engage, using more of do you know this and the science behind it. I also think there's an angle of making it more hard hitting, highlighting some of the negatives if you don't play with your child, and being on your phones and not engaging. I think society has moved more to accepting more direct messaging rather than being a little bit more gentle messaging, which was the case many years ago. And I think an example of this I saw was on Instagram, where someone said, what you do now matters for the future of your child's confidence. So actually about doing the thing now and not waiting.
Mhm.
So that's from the messaging side. And I think from the support side, I think it's about building confidence in dads to embrace all types of play. There's a big shift that's happening in society, moving away from gender stereotype roles. So I think there's a part of that of educating moms on the importance of challenging non-traditional roles in play, but also working with groups out there to make spaces more welcoming for dads to come along, moving away from the language of moms and dads groups, but more to parents as a whole. And just trying to make dads feel more comfortable and confident in some of these spaces so they feel more welcome. And another angle with that would be to get more male role models, whether it's in volunteering or even better as paid staff. And I think to do that, it's about better pay, valuing the importance of men, and play in society and just making it more socially acceptable. So it would be my quick takeaways, I think, that might
Right.
help.
That's great. And I suppose actually, Greg, you're probably perfectly placed to kind of follow on from that.
Yeah, one of the interesting things I seen in your report was about the confidence for dads to attend local groups. So it was 44% reported that they almost never or do not often feel able to get involved with local groups. I think Aimee hit on that, that dads aren't confident in these play spaces, so they're not comfortable to play, essentially. I run dads groups, so obviously we have dads supporting dads within that, and that's amazing. But every other group you go to is very kind of mum dominated, and so you're not going to be as confident in those spaces. So yeah, making them more accepting, more comfortable for dads to be in will definitely help them feel more comfortable to play. And I think aside from that as well, about valuing different types of play, another really surprising thing in the report there was that 2% of dads prefer rough and tumble play. Rough and tumble play and dads is like this. Like, what are you talking about? And I think that goes to the value of what play is. I had a lot of this working in nurseries where as soon as children start engaging in rough and tumble play, it's cut down. It's bad play. That's not the type of play we want to do. We want to go over here and do this nice play. And you don't see the value that rough and tumble play actually has in a child's development, because it is really important for their development. So yeah, valuing different types of play that more suit dads would help as well. Because I know
I
role
think that's a
play for
really
me
important
with the children.
that's a really important point about rough and tumble play actually. Yeah, I was really surprised by how few dads mentioned rough and tumble play. And Anna Mackin certainly I know from her research says that it's a really you get really high levels of bonding or this kind of the these peaks in kind of neurological reward systems, which mean that dads bond with their children really well through rough and tumble play, all that giggling and, chasing each other around, all that kind of stuff. Particularly, so if dads are time poor, actually a really great way of maintaining and developing those bonds is to kind of engage in that kind of play. So you get that kind of peak bonding reward, I suppose, from that kind of activity. So yeah, really important point actually that, and something that we should be encouraging, I think, I have to say. Lisa, have you got anything to add?
Very little, I would say. I again was looking at the report and it really did stick out to me that the rough and tumble was so low. And I used to work with a group in an early years sector and we always kind of had a mantra of safety third. And I think that safety first is on everyone's mind all the time now. I can't even remember. I remember fun was first and I can't even remember what second was, but safety came third. And I think that that's been sanitized so much recently, and getting that message out maybe again to dads that a bit of danger is actually really good for children, and learning how to take risks is so important as children grow older.
Yeah.
So yeah, getting it in early is important.
Yeah, very true. And I'm sure Aimee, well, your sort of work around risk taking and play is huge. Um, so I'm just going to carry on just for now. So thanks to the expert panel for that. The next part of the report looks at barriers to bonding. As I said, there's quite a lot in the report, which I can't go into in depth at the moment, unfortunately. But as I said, we'll send that round. And I'm not going to spend an awful lot of time on this, but paternity leave for certainly for Dad Rock and us as organisation has been a real focus over the last year. There's a lot of work happening down in Westminster, largely as a result of a campaigning group called Dad Shift. And I believe they're making real inroads into making this change. But currently, UK dads and non-birthing parents just get 2 weeks off statutory paternity leave, and that's paid at half the minimum wage. And self-employed people get absolutely nothing. Uh, their research, so DadShift research has shown that it really is the worst in Europe. And during this year's dad survey, we asked dads a bit more about their paternity leave. And shockingly, actually, as you can see from this pie chart, 78% of dads of the 400 dads that participated in our dad survey this year, said that they just didn't feel as though they had enough time to bond with their baby and support their parents. So, I mean, if you don't need any more evidence in that really to support change. But my feeling is that lots of Scotland's infants are being denied the really best start in life as a result of this poor paternity leave, and it can't be underestimated, I think. This is another shocking thing that came out of the dad survey last year, is that over 3/4 of dads took 2 weeks or less paternity leave on the run up to having their youngest child. I mean, it just struck me as criminal almost that dads were negligent actually, in a way that dads were allowed to take so little time off. If mum's recovering from a C-section, as this one of these dads was saying, and then having to go back to work while mum is at home recovering from surgery and looking after a child, it feels so unfair. And certainly we really do need to reform paternity leave. The other bar chart that you can see shows uh, the number of dads that told us that they didn't have enough time to spend with their child, and you can see the dads who took between 1 and 2 weeks off, or were given between 1 and 2 weeks paternity leave. 90% of that group said that it just wasn't enough. And if you look in contrast to the dads who had 6 weeks or more, just 23% of that group said that they didn't have enough time. So, if you went from 1 to 2 weeks to 6 weeks, it makes all the difference to fathers and whether they feel as though they have enough time to bond with their children. So I'm going to just fast forward just a little bit of a segue into this section, but I'm going to talk about digital distractions being a barrier to bonding. So we asked dads this year about their mobile phone use, so not the use of their mobile phone by their children, but about their mobile phone use. And we're going to look specifically at dads with young children. But what we found was that mobile phones frequently interrupt the time that dads spend with their infants in the first year. So we know from YouGov that 54% of men aged between 25 and 49 have admitted that they use their phones too much. And 33%, so a third of the dads in that age range, are trying to reduce their usage. When we asked about dads whether they felt as though their mobile phone use was interrupting their time with their children, 31% of fathers with an infant, so that's a child under 1, reported that their mobile phone often or very regularly interrupted the quality time with their baby, which is a worrying response. And we might actually believe that number may be higher actually. And why does it matter? So there's been a recent study that's come out, I think, in the last year around parental social media engagement and family connection, that found that excessive social media usage can lead to reduced emotional availability, so being physically present but mentally absent. Relationship disruption, so weakening the emotional cohesion of a family, and negative role modeling, so influencing a child's own future relationship with technology. So these are all the sort of potential consequences of overuse of mobile phones. Crucially, this study highlighted that fathers were more likely than mothers to have lower awareness of these negative impacts. And we can see, so we asked dads about what was interrupting their time. So what were they doing with their phones that was interrupting their time with their children? And perhaps unsurprisingly, what we found most was that social media was what dads were spending their time on their phone. So 84% of dads told us that it was social media, followed by messaging apps, so the likes of WhatsApp, so on and so forth, entertainment, emails, and so on and so forth. And if we break down that social media figure of 84%, we can see actually what platforms dads are using. So a quarter of those dads talks about Facebook, 18% about WhatsApp, 17% about Instagram, and then YouTube and TikTok as well. So we can see there's this kind of range of applications that dads are using that are kind of drawing their attention away from their child and towards their phone. So I'm really delighted, I have to say, to have Lisa here today. So, I mean, obviously there are huge benefits to using digital technology in the form of apps. We've got Julian, I know from DadPad here today, and there's some real massive benefits to having digital technology and being able to monitor and share information. So it's absolutely not all bad. But I suppose the question really is, how can dads best use technology without having a negative, without it negatively affecting the relationship with their children? So I'm going to go to Lisa first on this one.
Thank you. Yeah, I mean, absolutely, I agree. Smartphones are so useful. Digital tech is so useful. I think it's a great tool for parents, especially, well, I would say especially when they've got a very small baby, the support and the education that you get through your phone in kind of a wildly diverse society these days is just, you can't live without the phone. I've spoken to a lot of dads about their smartphone use, especially dads with infants, and they often kind of saying that they want to almost hide their phone use from their babies, that they don't want them to see that. But babies, even babies, notice what we're doing constantly, and dads have told me a lot of the time that it does become this kind of point of friction. And what we know, especially with children as they get older, so there's been a couple of studies mostly with children in kind of middle childhood and adolescence who really find it hypocritical how much their parents use the phone when they have, screen time guidelines, screen time restrictions placed on them for their parents to be using it all the time. And I think just last year, a study came out showing even 4, 5, 6-year-olds are showing those same kind of feelings that their parents are always on their phones is how they see it. Obviously, that's not true, but I think one of the ways that parents can really kind of get around this is kind of having more of an open, transparent approach to smartphone use, which I think is so important. And I think it's bringing it out into the open and being very mindful of talking about smartphone use. And I think this is one way that we can really encourage dads to have a good relationship with their phone, a good relationship with their tech, and a good relationship with their child. I think that, like, even with babies, I kind of give this advice all the time, even with babies, to speak about what you're doing on the phone, to say, oh, I'm just looking this up, or I'm just calling someone, or I'm just, checking a time of something. And even with babies, to create that accountability for what you're doing in that moment is great for everyone involved. I think it really builds habits and patterns that you want to see in yourself and in your children. So I think having these like patterns that you can encourage mums and dads especially to build into their family, so that when their children are growing up, talking about smartphones and talking about what we're doing on our phones becomes much more of an open thing to do, because that role modeling is so important for keeping children safe when they're on their phones later. And so I think just having that kind of open conversations is really the best thing that we can encourage parents to do, dads to do. I do think there's some incredible, like you said, DadPad is such an incredible app. Making sure, I almost think we've talked a little bit about kind of, spaces that dads need to be in. Digital spaces also, we need to open up a lot more spaces where dads feel comfortable digitally. And having apps like DadPad is so great because there's so little, even digitally, that's targeted to dads. Whereas mums have almost too many apps to choose from where they can
Yeah,
learn
goodness.
and be part of something. And so I think, yeah, we're again in a position where opening up space for dads digitally is as important as opening up spaces for them, in the real world, I guess. So
That's
yeah, for
such
me, that's the
useful
biggest thing.
such useful feedback. The other thing, sorry, Connor and I talked about as we were putting this together is whether, certainly with a very young newborn, where dads can kind of slightly feel a bit edged out of that relationship. So the focus is on mum. Is there a temptation for dads just to kind of spend that time on their phone? So they're not getting that backwards and forwards with their child quite yet. So there'd be a temptation then just to um you know, fill that gap of potential, that boredom gap, I suppose. I'm just wondering whether you saw that in or have heard of that anecdotally.
Definitely. I would absolutely agree. I mean, I also think having a very small baby sometimes just is very boring. Like when you're feeding the baby's napping a lot, there's a lot of boredom, there's a lot of frustration. And I think being a dad adds to that kind of frustration. And so, yeah, a great outlet is your phone because it's right there. It has every type of emotion regulation on it that you could wish for. Whether it actually regulates emotions or not is different, but we all feel like it's going to help us. It's a great stress relief. It's, there's support on there if we need it, but it's so easy to slide into finding, apps and games and stuff that we're like, oh, we'll just do that for a second. And then it turns into, hours. So I think that is an issue. And we also recently talked to a lot of mums and a lot of dads about the smartphone use, how they felt about it, and particularly around judgment. And while both mums and dads said that they were worried about how much they were using their phones, mums felt a lot more judgment from other people, whereas dads didn't seem to feel that much judgment from kind of wider society about using their phones around their baby. So I think that just also is another thing that kind of just makes it a little bit easier for them to do it. It's almost like the expectations are not so high that they should be, like you say, that they should be attending to the baby. And so they've almost got this free pass that they can go
Gosh,
and use the phone a bit more.
such an interesting insight, isn't it? I'm just conscious of time. Aimee, Greg, have you got any quick thoughts before we move on?
My point of view, I was just I think you shared about this last time, Lisa, but just the use of digital technology for play, and actually it's a great way to engage with your child. So particularly when they get a bit older and the child's wanting to do a bit more gaming, actually understanding what your child's doing, sitting with them, getting involved with them, it's a great way to monitor the content, but also to build up your relationship with them. So I think that is key as the child gets older. And I think there also is something in there again about the messaging and outlining the importance of what it means being on your phone. Actually, your child engages with you all the time, whether they're a baby or older. And they're losing that attachment, they're not getting that same attention if you're on your phone. So links in again to some of the points that Lisa was just saying, but actually making that clear messaging and sharing that so parents understand what that means.
And finally, Greg, have you got anything?
Not much extra to add. Just I get called out all the time by my own kids for being on my phone. We have strict rules like no phones at the table, and sometimes you can't help yourself. You just have a little peek, and suddenly you're getting shouted at by a 7-year-old. But yeah, it was kind of. I found it interesting that a lot of the dads, you could almost track the age of the dads by what they were spending their time on. I'd guess the median age for people who filled out this survey were about 35, 40 years old because they're all on Facebook. The young folk aren't on Facebook anymore. So I thought that was quite interesting, but it was good to see teams so far down. They weren't interested in work. That was like their downtime. So I think there probably is a connection here between the kind of, we've seen through the survey that we reckon dads are working a lot more, which means in that downtime, they're wanting space to relax, but they're fighting that battle between spending time with their children, spending time on themselves. So there's probably an element of that going on as well.
Well, thank you very much for that. Really insightful. I'm really we're running a little bit behind, but that was so useful to get your thoughts. Such an important issue, actually, such a hot topic as well, I would say, and not an awful lot of attention gets spent on parents' involvement in digital technology. The focus tends to be on children. So the next section is about supporting new dads. So this is a bit of a dense slide here, but we asked these two questions of the dads this year. So we asked, during pregnancy in the first 2 years, where did you go for information or advice about caring for your wee one? Now you can see overwhelmingly that most dads went to their partner. So 68% of dads told us that they went to their partner in the first instance. And that was followed by friends and family, and then parenting websites, parenting books, podcasts and apps. And only 17% of those dads said that they went to statutory services like GPs and health visitors and so on and so forth. So there's a real reliance on mums actually to provide information to dads. That's certainly where they look for support, was through their partner. So that was caring for their little one. So that kind of practical support in how do I look after this little bundle. The other thing that we asked was, when you're becoming a new dad, where did you go for advice and support to help you personally cope with that change? So dads responded slightly differently to this, but still remarkably, actually, the top answer for this was their partner. So 45% of dads told us that there was their even though it was a man going through that transition into fatherhood, they were still going to their partner for advice and support about that transition into parenthood. Friends and families came a close second, and then other dads, so dads out with that I guess close friends and families unit, came in third at 15%. So that's where dads were looking for support. But actually, we then followed up that series of questions with asking about where they felt as though they got the most helpful advice or support. So this is an open question. It was qualitative rather than quantitative responses. So Connor went through all of the data, all of these rich text pieces of data, and tried to find, categorize the different types of support that dads got. And we found, actually, surprisingly, that when it came to the most helpful advice or support, friends and family came first. So it wasn't the partners who they were seeking their support from. It was actually friends and family that gave the most helpful support. And partners came in second at 24%. But interestingly, local groups and community came in third there. So it's if you're developing these community connections around dads, they really valued that support from local community groups, local dads groups like Dads Rock and Dads Matter and Five Gingerbread. All of these local community groups, they really benefited from. Books and podcasts came next. Other dads, just slightly less, 10%. Then parenting and web forums. Statutory services, only 7% of dads mentioned statutory services, and social media content came in sixth. So you can see, actually, that dads really valued those close community connections, face to face, really, I think, personal connections to others, as getting helpful advice and support. And I was talking to Connor earlier today about the fact that it reminded me of that old adage that it takes a village to raise a child. And I was thinking, well, here's the evidence. In a way, it's showing that dad's preference and where they got that helpful support was from their local community, their local connections, which was really interesting to see. So coming back again to the panel, given that the majority of dads turn to their partner for advice but are seen as less helpful than other sources, should we be using mums as a conduit for parenting information aimed at dads? And Greg, this is quite a tricky question here, but I thought I'd come to you first.
No, we shouldn't.
Well,
Now,
that's good. Can you expand?
you hear about the mental load a lot, and I think a lot of the time the mental load is put onto women. To then expect them to be that main conduit of information on how to look after your child, you're asking a lot at that stage. And I think a lot of that comes down to the way our statutory services run, where it's very mum focused. And so then when baby comes along, mum is automatically the one that knows everything. But I always go back to a quote from one of my old colleagues, Thomas. You might remember him, where he said when he had his first child, he kept asking his wife all these questions. And eventually she turned around to him and said, "I've never done this before either." And it was at that moment he realized that he needed to work harder on finding the answers himself and doing more for himself and not relying so much on mum, because it's true, mum's never done it before either. Why should she be the fountain of knowledge that we expect her to be? So yeah, there's definitely that element at play there for me, in that mums do enough. Why should we then rely on them to look after dad as well? But I'm not completely blaming dads in that. I think there is an element of the societal norms of mums look after the kids, dads go to work, and that's still at play. And it comes from the way we interact with dads early on, from conception. They need to be included more at that stage to actually feel like they're a valuable role once the child is born.
Absolutely.
Yeah, that's kind of my thoughts on it there.
And have you got anything to add, Aimee?
You made me smile, Greg, because I've got the same sort of example as what you were sharing about Thomas when I was chatting to a few of my work colleagues. But I think about the mental load and all of that. But I think just to add to that, I think at the moment where society is at, it is engaging a lot with the moms as their primary caregiver initially, when they're kind of starting that engagement with professionals. So I think encouraging or supporting moms to be able to build the confidence in dads on how to kind of parent and how to engage and where they can get their support from is something we should be doing. So actually working with the moms and talking to them, well, you could talk about this or we could send them there. I think that is really important as well. So just getting alongside, we're not going to change it overnight, getting dads more involved. So we kind of got to tackle it from a few different angles. So using the moms as a way in for now and supporting them, but also trying to get in around the side and talk about more of the whole family approach. And actually, it's the parent, not just the mom, when we're doing the engagement.
Right. And Lisa, have you got anything to add?
I don't think I have at this point. I think that was very well put, very succinct.
Absolutely.
I'll save some time.
Thanks, Lisa. Great. Oops. There we go. So we're sort of getting to the end of this little bit anyway. So the other thing that we asked the dads this year, so 2025, is what support was missing for them. So we asked this question. I would have benefited from more information and support with, and then we gave the dads these options, and they could either strongly disagree with the statement, disagree, they were unsure, or they agreed or strongly agreed. And as you can see, just generally, you can see that dads felt as though they needed more support right across the board. So the information on the right-hand side of the screen gives some percentages of the dads who strongly agreed with these statements or agreed with them. So 76% of the dads, of these 440 dads that responded, told us that they felt as though they wanted more support, knowing what support was available to dads. They just simply didn't know what was out there for dads at the time when they became a parent. 67%. So that's 2/3 of dads didn't feel as though they had enough information about how they should cope with the transition into fatherhood. So the impact that it might have on their mental health, their relationships, all that kind of personal transition, personal change that they'll be going through. And third, just practical parenting skills. So information on feeding, bonding, sleep, and routines. They just didn't know, they felt as though there should be more information to support them with their journey through that. Finally, I mean, and these are still very high numbers actually. So 56, over half of the dads said that they wanted more information on state-funded and private childcare. Just over half of dads talked about managing money and work. And 46%, so just under half of dads, wanted more information about playing and engaging and bonding with their children. So you can see, actually, dads just need more information in general, but that kind of information about just where to get support was a real standout in terms of missing information for them. So I'm going to come back to the panel again and just, it's obvious that dads need more information, but how do we better connect dads with accurate, trustworthy information that they need through interactions with professionals, through peer support and digital content? So, Aimee, I'm going to come to you first, particularly around digital content question. How can we best help dads through that digital, through providing information digitally?
To me, sorry. Yeah, I think it comes back to, it's kind of what we've talked about earlier about kind of spaces. I really think that like when we talk a lot about getting dads feeling comfortable, we talk about physical spaces a lot, and dads don't always feel comfortable in spaces that are targeted at parents. But again, I feel like it's the same with digital spaces. There's just so much, again, that's targeted at mums. Like we know that kind of there are Facebook groups out there, there are groups that are there, but they're still not really reaching dads in the same way that they reach mums. I just think there's a lot of the time that dads don't feel comfortable in these spaces. I do think that more is happening now. We do have people like DadPad who are doing some incredible work. What I'm going to do is probably fob this off a little bit, because the most successful example I normally talk about is Dad's Rock, and the WhatsApp group that they have, which I know is incredibly successful in terms of providing support. And so I just wonder if sometimes it's about working with dads to find what works for them best, because I think just taking a model that works for mums and saying, this is for you now, dads, you're in a safe space because it's for dads, doesn't seem to be working. But obviously, when we work with dads, like you see with Dad's Rock, it works. So there's something, I think, in making sure that it's not just a space that is, this is for parents, so it's going to work for dads, is making sure that it really is a space that's been tailored for dads. And probably Greg can talk on that a lot better than me.
Yeah, Greg, over to you. Why do you think that Dad's Rock has been so successful at building those kind of trusting relationships, I suppose, through WhatsApp?
I think just as was mentioned there, is that it's a space for dads. I think a lot of time you have, like, say, these parent spaces, and you try and do the same thing, but just say, but dads can also join. And it's not the same. You do have to have that separate thing. I had a thing recently where even in my child's school WhatsApp group for her class, where they're like, let's have a parents' night out for Christmas. And I thought, oh, perfect. That sounds great. I'd love to meet some new parents who've just moved school. And then I realized it was me and 13 mums going on it. And I was, this isn't a space for me, is it? This is a mums group I'm in. And I just had that sudden realization that, this space isn't for me. Fortunately, my wife didn't want to go, and I was locked in at that point, so I did have to go. And it was a lovely evening, but I'm confident in those spaces. So yeah, it needs to be a distinct, separate group, I feel. Years down the line, when, equity and equality needs to meet, perhaps those shared spaces can exist. But for the moment, I do think it just needs that separate attention.
And in terms of, so we've talked about professionals, or the information that professionals are providing, particularly through the NHS and health, universal services and health settings. How can those professionals better interact and better pass on information to dads?
I think that starts at a policy level. Like, dads don't get paid time off to go to midwife appointments. They don't get paid time off to go to health visitor appointments. And so they're missing out on a lot of those key moments where professionals can interact with them, because they're just not there. So a bit more of a policy kind of development, looking at, well, what time do dads need to actually make those connections and be at those appointments? would be a great start for that.
Yeah, so that kind of, rather than seeing dads as a bolt-on to mums, actually making sure that they're supported in their own right.
Yeah, make it really explicitly that dad should be there.
Absolutely. And in terms of, sorry, Greg, I'm going to come to you again, but in terms of that peer support as well, so how do we sort of foster dads to feel comfortable reaching out to other dads and other, men in their network um, to talk about their experiences?
I think the hardest part of it is developing that kind of core secure group, where people coming into it feel comfortable that there's a space there without being too vulnerable within it. So unfortunately, I think it comes down to numbers. You kind of need a good user base there, a good safe user base for other people to feel comfortable joining it. If it's just a few dads, you don't often see those connections happening as much, whereas there's lots of dads, they're kind of that smaller piece that they can kind of blend in that wee bit and make them a bit more comfortable. So unfortunately, you kind of need dads first to be able to build the group of dads. And even we at Dads Rock struggle with that sometimes.
So you need to kind of reach a critical mass where dads can kind of just lurk a little bit if they're feeling uncomfortable. Yeah, that's probably
that's
important, actually. Yeah.
Yeah, and that's the hardest part of dads.
I'm just going to carry on. So we're running out of time. Oh my gosh, we're out of time actually. So thanks for staying with us. Are we out of time? No, not out of time. Still got another 20 minutes.
Yeah.
Sorry, I'm having a moment there. I'm getting ahead of myself. I wanted to see whether I can actually, before we've got a little bit more time than I thought. Julian, actually, sorry, you've had your hand up, and I was going to wait until the end, but you're so involved in this area. I was thinking maybe
Yes,
you
thank
want to
you.
come in and explain a little bit about who you are and about your experiences of running DadPad.
Absolutely. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, absolutely.
Oh, fab. So just hearing you all is just amazing. Obviously, we've got an app that's running in North Highlands. It's been going for a year and a half. I've just put into the chat about our latest case study, bringing all the things that you're talking to about making sure fathers understand the importance of everything, including the importance of play, showing them how to do, showing them how to bond, giving that information, showing them where support is the most crucial factor. But we don't have a system that allows that. If we can get the system back earlier, right from -9 months, well, from when they get the first scan, because that's when 93% of dads will attend. And we did that in North Highlands. And in Q3 last year, they had 50 downloads over 3 months. Rubbish. But I'd spoken to Jocelyn, who runs the north of Scotland scanning teams, and every scanning team member now, when they do the scanning photo, they get the dads onto the app and tell them how important it is they start to look at information because this is their baby too. And every minute they're signing up. So it went from 51 to 1,054 in the next quarter. So we've now got them engaged. They can then join the community group and we can start to, as they are in North Highlands, talk to those dads, get those numbers up, because what we've been battling for 10 plus years is a system that we haven't even had anything for dads. So my whole battle is to try and get into as many areas just so that there's something that provides the evidence-based information and shows them where all the signed off support is, like Dad's Rock or the local areas, because we need to build that kind of consensus that the beginning of the journey for fathers and co-parents is actually at the -9 months, well, the scanning point, because that's when they meet the system and all the evidence and all the reports show, you go to where dads are, because it will go to any group where they are. It's transferable. Someone's just put from Newham Council, we're about to launch in Newham. So we're in about 50 areas in the UK. I obviously want to do more in Scotland. And I think you're just absolutely right in terms of ready to build that inherently into your system. In fact, you've done better than England in terms of the scanning teams getting on board with it. So you're my model to show England how it works. And you've always been a bit ahead anyway, as far as I'm concerned, with your baby boxes, etc. From years ago. You were a bit of an inspiration to me 15 years ago. But actually, it's coming full circle. But in terms of visibility and presence, organizations who are father focused must make sure that we stand steadfast in, we need to be included in a bespoke way because we speak differently to our mum counterparts. We've got to be aware, we learn so many more things about what the dads and how they learn and what the effect on the baby is and how the baby interprets what we're doing with them. Just for one example, you gave You gave stats around fathers reach out for friends and family for support. Yes, that community is so much, but sometimes dads will make choices to speak to friends who's smooth and don't challenge them. And so if they do want to reach out for that support because the friends go, oh no, it's all right, she'll deal with it. And I'm not saying that's everyone. I'm just saying there's a lot in this. So statistics can tell one story, but actually, until we listen and hear the dad's voice from the start in real time from -9 months through to 2, and get them asking those questions, ask them about those things. What support, what impact is that support having with those your children? How are the babies thriving? Until we tie that in with services, and very much getting more men into this early years. I'll finish in a second, but the last anecdote, just to tie in, is I built a nursery in a deprived area, and I know my co-director, when we went in as men into this nursery, the children themselves reach out for those men, don't they? They climb all over you. They want that rough and tumble in a way that all the other workers that don't, they're having to stand back. It is something that shows there is this gap between the knowledge we have about how men are in this perinatal period and how services have created those habits, as we're talking about, that we all want. We need to change that to more positive workforce habits, and so that we encompass everyone within that family, whoever that baby is looking up at, and build those. So after this, if anyone wants to get in touch and just talk about how we can just get closer together and talk about things, I'm obviously very excited as to where you are. But our app is available in North Highlands, and obviously we're looking to reach out to a bit further around Scotland. I am now and ready to do that.
I'm so delighted that it's really taking off in the Highlands, and there's so much good work happening up in NHS Highlands. So obviously you guys and what's happening around the maternity services and also the third sector up there, and there's such an active constellation of both statutory services and third sector organisations who are all talking to each other and all want what's best for the child at the end of the day.
Absolutely. And we want to digitally put something, or obviously these guides as well. Just the ways you can just talk and engage people with digital or books, just so that they can have something to hand, gives them the do's and the don'ts. Dads do like a list. They do like to have, we don't know what we don't know. And we're actually point and shoot some of the time, particularly, but we can't keep overwhelming them. We want it in a place where they can find the support. So our app has a section, all the local support, all the VSF agencies, all the family hubs or children's centres that are available, all the statutory support as well, in one place, and a community group where they can talk to each other and the statutory services at will. So we want to make sure that we build that picture, and then kind of earlier. It's kind of bringing those services that fundamentally have been set up a bit later on, where crisis happen much earlier. So it's more preventative, and we can give them that information from the dad's mouths and partners' mouths themselves, really.
And just coming in, that's a nice segue into our last little bit before we peel off for the day. But I'm going to finish off by going back to exactly what dads have said to us, actually. So we asked the final question that we asked dads in our 2005 survey was, what one piece of advice would you give to a new dad? So we got lots and lots of amazing quotes from dads. Connor sifted through around about 400 responses, something like that, to see whether we could find some kind of commonality, some key themes that kept on coming up again and again. And that's what I'm going to take you through just at the moment. So the first thing we found was that 48% of dads who responded talked about cherishing that time that you have together with your baby. So spending as much time together as possible, taking as much leave as you possibly can at that time. So, don't leave. Be there for your child at such an important time. Get involved. So get hands-on, make sure that you're there looking after mom, actively involved in caring for your child and asking questions and learning what you can, both from professionals, but also from friends and family, so on and so forth. So you can see some of the quotes there from dads. Spend all the time you can enjoying the little moments, bonding with your baby and supporting mum. Step up, get stuck in, you'll love it. So 47% of dads just talked about trust the process of becoming a dad. Go easy on yourself, enjoy just being a dad, go with the flow. And kind of saying that your life will change, so you might have to let go of old habits, old bits of your life, but it's all okay. And just, it is a process of change. So one dad saying, don't expect to know how to do everything or how to feel. Be prepared to go off script and trust your own instincts. It takes time for routines, bonds, relationships to balance and make sense of or work. So, it's just this kind of reassurance that it's a process and you're going to get things wrong, but that's okay. Just be kind on yourself. 20% of dads talked about actively looking after yourself, so seeking support and not ignoring your own health and prioritizing sleep where possible. So dad saying anytime you're worried about something, always talk about it, because 9 out of 10 times someone else has gone through something similar. Supporting your partner, but not forgetting to support yourself. Don't put too much pressure on yourself. There's support and help out there. And another dad just saying, sleep when you can, as much as you can, which is probably very, very good advice. Also, dads talking about looking after their partner. So 19% of dads talked about looking after their partner, supporting their partner and nurturing the relationship that you have. So try and help your partner as much as possible during the night feeds, even just being there for company. It can hopefully mean that you're not as isolated, they're not as isolated and don't feel alone. So making sure that mum's well looked after in that case. Another dad said it's easy to get sucked into your child's world, but remember to make time for your partner. So, it's just that kind of that zooming back out, not focusing everything on the child, but actually making sure that the relationship is healthy and that you're healthy. So almost finally, I was going to turn back to the panel, and I'll probably start with you here, Greg, as a dad and as a dad who works with lots of other dads. If you were to just give one piece of advice to new dads, what would that be? And maybe I'll give you two, actually.
Well, you hit on it earlier, Kathy. It takes a village has always been something that I feel strongly about, and I think everyone's kind of lost that sense of the village in these modern times, and we kind of find it online and in different places, but it's not the same. It's not a good village. It's a fake village somewhere. So actually find real people you can connect to and make those connections and put that effort into finding the village is really important and should be something you put a lot of energy into, I feel.
Absolutely. I think that's right. I'm a big advocate of a researcher called Robin Dunbar, who talked about how important those social connections are to our health and well-being, actually. So the greater our social network and the stronger our social network, the longer we'll live. And I think probably we need to invest in that right at the start of a child's life and very much kind of build that community around every child. That's great. Aimee, I'll come to you next, I think, if that's all right.
Well, you had some great responses from the dads. It's not really my place to say in some ways, but I think just to really remind dads of their importance and their role and their responsibility, and that actually play, you can do it all through play. It's fun. It's vitally important for your child. So just be brave and embrace it.
Absolutely. Embrace play. Sounds great to me.
Absolutely. It's fun as well.
That's for sure. And finally, Lisa, I'll come to you.
Yeah, so I mean, obviously all of those are so important. And I do talk about the digital village a lot and how it's not the real village. It's a makeshift village, I guess. But I guess one thing would be also that I think a lot of dads want to be great role models and want to change the way they live and have, healthy habits. And I think just giving grace to the fact that you're dealing with so much. And so, yeah, if things don't always go right one day and you do slip into habits that you don't feel are great for role modeling to an extent, give yourself grace on that and start again the next day. And secondly, and this is just for everyone, turn off push notifications, especially on your social media. You don't need that.
Get rid of the push note.
Get
That's
rid
really
of push
good. Very
notifications
practical,
unless
actually.
they're necessary.
That's great. Well, thank you very much to the panel for giving up your time, and everybody here actually for giving up your time, spending an hour and a half with us. If you've got any questions, we've still got the last 10 minutes. If anybody's got any questions or anything burning, any burning thoughts, just put your hands up, and if you want to ask either me or Aimee, Greg, Lisa, uh, any questions about what you've done today? I'm just going to have a quick look through the chat to see if there's anything. Colin, you're asking about rough and tumble play. Just wondering whether you might want to ask that question about rough and tumble play if you're around.
Kathy, you're putting me on the spot.
Always, Colin.
I think so. Colin McFarlane, I work for YMCA Scotland, but I'm also part of the development of the Scottish Healthy Masculinity Alliance. And I think what I was getting at is, I would also, I'm probably more importantly, I'm the dad of 3 kids from ages 21 to 13, 2 boys and a daughter at 21. I think the thing for me is a lot of what we're talking about is stuff we all kind of know. And I think, Kathy, you guys, and I've said this to you before, have done a brilliant piece on bringing this into a sharp focus for people. But the lack of male role models, the lack of men in the health professions, are all constructs that we're all dealing with on such a regular basis, that men don't feel comfortable having rough play with their children because it's frowned upon. You get funny looks if you're doing it in a park and you're playing with other kids and you're one, or there's 2 or 3 dads and there's 20 other women and parents. You feel self-conscious. You feel as though you're an interloper or you're an outsider. And if you're rough playing with your kids and you get the frowning looks, etc. So rough play has been a major part of me with my children. And so I'm saying rough play, I know is really important, but structurally and society-wise, we don't accept it. We don't like it. It's seen as being, well, actually, that's quite aggressive or challenge, and that's the point I was trying to make. I probably didn't write it very well because
That's all right.
my
I'm just
brain.
wondering. I'm just wondering whether Aimee might want to come back on that actually about that kind of really physical play, and whether you've got anything to help that, or because it can be seen as a bit challenging or a bit too rough, particularly for little kids, actually. And as you said, as Colin kind of rightly pointed out, that it's kind of often frowned upon. And is there anything? I know that you're quite that kind of risky play is something that Smart Play Network is quite is quite hot on, actually. So I don't know whether there's anything that you want to pick up on there.
Yeah, I think the points you made, Colin, are so fair, and you see that all the time. I've been around in this job for quite a while now. We actually created an information sheet on rough and tumble play about 9 years ago, because we were seeing it particularly in some of the settings, some of the early years settings that we were working with, and working with the parents, and they were just they were struggling to embrace that, and they were thinking, oh, don't do that, that's risky, you're going to hurt the child, and actually it's about, there's so much research out there. Kathy, you've pointed to some of it today, but there's just even more than that in terms of learning the boundaries. And actually, it's really important from a child's development as well, having that risky play. So I think it's actually about changing kind of the language and actually having those conversations. The research is all there. We do promote it. I think sometimes risky play has kind of gone mad in some respects, and then the amount of times I hear at my school, my children in my school are not allowed to run around and do TIG because they could trip over and fall. I'm like, come on, guys. So, it's not just the rough and tumble play in like the dads and the bonding there, but it's actually between the children. And actually, that is a way in which children learn to engage and develop and understand boundaries. So I think really as practitioners and professionals, we just need to be advocating that actually rough and tumble play is key. And actually We just need to talk about how you can do it safely. So understand boundaries, understand when someone says, please stop, listen to that, and talk to the children, talk to parents. And if you're feeling uncomfortable doing it at the park, if you're a dad, then do it at home, in your garden, in your house. Like, it doesn't have to be out and about. Do it where you're comfortable, and build it up from there. And as moms, I think sometimes moms can get in the way. Again, I'm gender stereotyping here, saying, don't do that, you'll hurt my child. So sometimes moms have to step back and say, okay, they do need this engagement. So it's kind of coming back to that kind of bigger picture, I would say.
Thanks for that, Aimee. I'm just wondering, so there was a comment from Adba Hussein from St Bart's NHS. I don't know whether, so you were talking about having father-specific antenatal classes with practical skills. I was just wondering whether you might want to talk about what's happening in St Bart's down in England.
So it's not in St Bart's. It's actually in Newham General Hospital.
Oh,
and the
sorry.
other as a link role between the council, we've got a new role which is to support maternity. And one of the feedback that we've had is that there is a gap with fathers actually being involved in antenatal care, but also we're coming from a preventative state, and that's mum and dad, because obviously we have a different demographic here, and it is so complex. And to come back to that health literacy part, but actually getting dad on board and actually understanding that he also needs a platform. He also needs to understand what is it to be a father? How do we understand that? How do we get them ready for it? Because no one was born with a manual on how to be a parent. What does bonding look like? What does that look like from different cultures and backgrounds? So it's really about bringing those in and thinking about, actually, does dad know how to change a nappy? Does he know how to about clipping nails? How do we get them ready for these things? So what we're planning to do with one of my colleagues who's recently started, Imran, who's also on the call, who's a father inclusion worker, is that we do plan from April, May time, we will do an antenatal class, a 6-week program for fathers, and that will include all of these practical skills, really talk about feeding baby, bonding baby, how to do all those things that they can do, but really make sure that they are ready and have the support network from the get-go. It's not just mum focus, but they are also more than welcome to attend the antenatal class with mum. But we wanted to make something really specific for fathers, really get their views and opinions on board, and really make it as in you said we did, and really get their feedback continuously so we can tailor it for them in partnership and to really get their views heard.
I think that's really important, actually. You brought up an important sort of point, is that not all dads are the same, and you need to tailor your services, tailor your provisions to the dads that you're serving, actually. I think that's really important. And I'm sure certainly Greg and Julian, who are on the call at the moment, I'm sure can provide you with some helpful advice. Oh, Julian's there to respond, actually. That would be useful.
I just wanted to quickly add, obviously, I think you mentioned that you're aware of DADpad coming to Newham. Obviously, we in 15 languages, we'll add as many as we can. It should support, as you said, the groups that you're going to do. For years, children's centres have just been pulling cards out of our guides or using our app just to reinforce and start conversations with dads when they do start these groups. So I'm very pleased to hear you're going to do a very specific programme for and break down those cultural barriers. It stems from the point that as until we have a systemic kind of reboot that says, actually, we need to hear the father's voice from the get-go, how are we going to know what they need in terms of advice? It's no good to get it after the fact, because they kind of have gone past that without getting the support they may have needed. So if we can agree, because it's an innovation approach working with men in the perinatal period since forever, really, still in the last 20 years, the research is just showing why we should do it. But it all stems on giving dads, as a worker who's worked with men for 15 years in groups, giving them the motivation by telling them why they need to do what they need to do and putting it in a way that doesn't make their head stick back in the sand and encompasses working with their partner to be that teamwork person before the baby arrives. So we've got that work to do. Hence, we're writing a mum pad as well about relationships and sharing aspirations and stuff. But dads need that specific information too. So it's really nice to hear. And if there's any way we can help in Newham with that specific antenatal class program, and because there's a community group you can run on the app for Newham, just for you to talk to them when they're not in the group with you, and you can share stuff, how they're getting on, and just get to know your group specifically and locally. And that's what we're trying to expand everywhere. But thanks.
Awesome. Well, it's great to be able to see all those connections right across the UK, so Scotland and beyond. We're just about out of time. I'm just wondering whether anybody had any last thoughts, or the expert panel had any final thoughts before we go. If not, just I want to say a huge thank you for everyone coming along today. Uh, Most importantly, to the 850 dads who participated in the dad survey over the last couple of years that we drew all this data from. I mean, without them, we just simply wouldn't have been able to put this report together and talk to you. So a huge thank you to the dads. A massive thank you to the Scottish Government Baby Box team who have paid for this work, who funded us to do this work, and also helped us with the questions that they wanted us to pose to the dads this year. So hopefully the information that we're gathering will be dispersed out throughout the government, which is exciting for us and really gratifying. Obviously, to our fantastic expert panel, I'm so grateful that you've taken the time out of your day to come along and share your thoughts, and everybody who's contributed today. And lastly, but no mean leastly, once again, a massive thank you to Connor, who has been sitting quietly on the call today. But as I said, he has been absolutely the driving force behind putting this report together. And we'll make sure that it gets sent out to everybody. But a huge thank you to Connor, who's put an enormous amount of work into not only putting today's event on, but also putting the report together. So massive thank you to him. And before we go, I think that Connor, have you put the evaluation into the chat?
Yeah, put there again.
Yeah, so if you wouldn't mind just spending, it's a really, really short evaluation form. If you wouldn't mind spending 5 minutes, maybe even less than that, 2 minutes probably, just filling out a form, just so we know how to do things better next time. We certainly did look at the responses to the last Ed survey, and we've changed the event today to make it better. So yeah, we try and improve these things all the time. But an enormous thanks to you. Thanks for taking your time out. I hope it was useful, and hopefully we'll see you again. We've got another couple of events coming up in the next couple of months. Actually, we're going to be looking at Dads in the Highland, Julian. So looking at Homestart Caithness and the work that they're doing up there, and actually all the work that's happening up in the Highlands. So it'd be great for you to come along to that one. We'll also be looking at the work that's happening in Dundee as well. So keep an eye out for all that stuff coming up in the next couple of months. But thank you ever so much for coming along. I'm going to stop sharing now.